Let's meet Athanasius of Alexandria, the pint-sized powerhouse who took on emperors, heretics, and exiles like they were going out of style. And this isn't just another dusty chapter in church history, it's a tale of intrigue, suspense, and theological throwdowns that would make even the most dramatic Netflix series blush. So grab your popcorn, settle into your favorite reading nook, and prepare to meet the man who is more stubborn than a mule, more persistent than a telemarketer, all in the name of orthodox Christianity. So let's look at the early years, and our story begins in the bustling streets of Alexandria, Egypt, around the year 296 AD. And this is a city where philosophy, religion, and politics collided as a perfect storm. And so into this intellectual melting pot, little Athanasius is born. But don't let his humble beginnings fool you, this kid was destined for greatness, even if he was shorter than your average garden gnome. So legend has it that young Athanasius caught the eye of Bishop Alexander while playing baptism with his friends on the beach. It's like a theological version of Cops and Robbers, but with more water and less running. And little did Alexander know that he just discovered the theological equivalent of a diamond in the rough. And so under Alexander's wing, Athanasius quickly rose through the ranks of the Alexandrian church. He devoured books like they were going out of style. He sharpened his theological wit until it could cut through the toughest arguments like a hot knife through butter. Little did he know, he was training for the fight of his life, a battle that would make David versus Goliath look like a friendly game of checkers. Enter the Arian controversy, when heresy strikes back. Just when Athanasius thought his biggest challenge would be deciding which scroll to read next, a theological storm was brewing that would make Hurricane Katrina look like a gentle breeze. Enter Arius, a charismatic priest with a smile that could charm the sandals off a Pharisee, and a heresy that was spreading faster than gossip in a small town. So Arius was teaching that Jesus, the Son of God, was a created being, not eternal and not quite divine. It was like he was saying Superman is just a really impressive human with a fancy cape. And this idea was catching on faster than a cat video on the internet, and it threatened to tear the church apart. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine, tired of all this theological bickering and probably worried about the impact on his empire, he called the Council of Nicaea. And so imagine, this is like the theological Super Bowl. You have bishops from all over the empire gathering to duke it out over the nature of Christ. And Athanasius, not even 30 years old and probably needing a phone book to see over the pulpit, he found himself as Alexander's right-hand man in the thick of the action. And the council was a theological thriller with more plot twists than you would find in an M. Night movie. And so in the end, orthodoxy prevailed and the Nicene Creed was born. But this is just sort of the beginning of Athanasius' wild ride, because little did he know that his greatest battles were yet to come. Because Athanasius ends up having an unintended world tour through exiles. So just when Athanasius thought he could settle into a nice, quiet life as the new bishop of Alexandria, Alexander having passed the torch to him, the real drama began. Because it turns out, just because you win a council doesn't mean everyone goes home happy. And the Arians were like that friend who can't admit they lost at Monopoly, so they just keep flipping the table. And what followed was a series of exiles that would make even the most seasoned travelers' heads spin. Athanasius, he's kicked out of Alexandria more times than a rowdy drunk from a bar on a Saturday night. But did he give up? No, because with each exile, he just seems to get more and more determined. So his first exile around 335 to 337 AD, he is banished to Germany. Now Athanasius probably thought, at least the beer is good. Then his second exile happens 2 years later when he flees to Rome, because nothing says, I'm right, like trying to get the Pope on your side. His third exile, which lasts from 356 to 362 AD, he lives among the monks in the Egyptian desert. It's like a really interesting spiritual retreat, but with more sand and less air conditioning. His fourth exile, which lasts a few years, he's banished by Emperor Julian the Apostate. Julian probably thought 4 times the charm, right? No. Fifth exile comes right after that, and he hides in his father's tomb, because sometimes you just need to get away from it all. Wait. But through it all, Athanasius kept writing, he kept teaching, and he was just generally being a thorn in the side of heretics everywhere. Kind of like a theological boomerang. You could throw him far, he was going to come back and smack you in the back of the head. Now, you might think that being on the run would put a damper on one's literary career. But for Athanasius, he just turned those exiles into more time to write bestsellers. And his work spread faster across the empire than you can say homoousios. That's of substance for you non-Greek speakers out there. Then he writes On the Incarnation. This was like the Harry Potter of theological treatises. Everyone was reading it, even if they didn't quite understand all the big words. And in it, Athanasius laid out why it was so important that Jesus was fully God and fully man. It was like he was saying, look, if Jesus isn't God, we are all in bigger trouble than a snowman in a summer. But Athanasius wasn't just one-hit wonder. He also penned Life of Anthony, a biography of the famous desert monk that became the eat, pray, love of its day, inspiring Christians everywhere to embrace monasticism. It's kind of sort of like a spiritual self-help book, but with more fasting and fewer vacations to Bali. And as Athanasius approached the end of his life, he could look back on a career that was more action-packed than an Indiana Jones movie. He had stood against emperors, outsmarted heretics, and endured more exiles than most people have hot dinners. And it was said of him, Athanasius contra mundum. Athanasius against the world, and somehow against all odds, he won. His unwavering defense of the divinity of Christ, it shaped Christian orthodoxy for centuries to come. He provided the theological foundation that every other Christian thinker would build on. Without Athanasius, we might be singing a very different theological tune. But perhaps his greatest legacy was his example of standing firm in the face of overwhelming opposition. Athanasius showed that sometimes being right means being willing to stand alone. It's like he was the original rebel without a cause, but instead of a leather jacket, he wore a nice bishop's robe. Now, you might be thinking this Athanasius fellow sounds too good to be true. And you'd be right to be skeptical, because like any good hero, Athanasius had his flaws. He could be stubborn as a mule and about as subtle as a sledgehammer. His opponents accused him of everything from murder to magic, though these charges were about as believable as a flat earther at a NASA convention. But that's what makes Athanasius so fascinating, is that he wasn't just some plaster saint. He was a real person fighting real battles, making real mistakes, and somehow, through it all, he changed the course of Christian history.